he, bold as brass. D'ye take me for a dialect? 35 mile from Cape Clear, and 14 days from Boston Light. Suffering Christianity, 'tis a record, and by the same token I've a mother to Skibbereen. Think of it! The gall of 'em! But ye see, you can never keep things separate. The crew was mostly Cork and Kerry men, barrin' one Marylander that wanted to go back, but they called him a mutineer, and they ran the old Manila into Skibbereen, and they had an illigant time visitin' it round with friends on the old sod for a week. Then they went it, and it cost 'em 32 days to beat to the Banks again. 'Twas gettin' on towards fall, and grub was low, so Counahan run her back to Boston, wid no more bones to it."
"And what did the firm say?" Harvey demanded.
"Fwhat could they? The fish was on the Banks, and Counahan was at T Wharf talkin' in his record trip east. They took the satisfaction out of that, and it all came of not keepin' the crew and the rum sep'rate in the first place, and confusin' Skibbereen with Queeroo in the second. Counahan the navigator, rest his soul! He was an impromptu citizen." "Once I was in the Lucy Holmes," said Manuel in his gentle voice. "They not want any of our fish in Gloucester. Eh, what? Give us no price, so we go across the water, and think to sell to some Fayal man. Then it blow fresh, and we cannot see well. Eh, what? Then it blow some more fresh, and we go down below and drive very fast. No one know where. By and by we see a land, and it get some hot. Then come 2, 3 nigger in a brick. Eh, what? We ask where we are, and they say, now what you all think?"
"Grand Canary," said Disko, after a moment.
Manuel shook his head, smiling. "Blanco," said Tom Platt.
"No, worse than that. We was below Bezagos, and the brick she was from Liberia. So we sell our fish there. Not bad, so? Eh, what?"
"Can a schooner like this go right across to Africa?" said Harvey.
"Go round the Horn if there was anything worth goin' fer, and the grub holds out," said Disko. "My father he run his packet, and she was a kind o' pinky, about 50 ton, I guess. The Rupert. He run her over to Greenland's icy mountains the year ha'af our fleet was tryin' after cod there. And what's more, he took my mother along with him to show her how the money was earned, I presume. And they was all iced up, and I was born at Disko. Don't remember nothin' about it, o' course. We come back when the ice eased in the spring, but they named me for the place. Kind o' mean trick to put up on a baby, but we're all bound to make mistakes in our lives."
"Sure, sure," said Salters, wagging his head. "All bound to make mistakes, and I tell you 2 boys here that you've made a mistake. You don't make fewer'n 100 a day. The next best thing's to own up to it like men." Long Jack winked one tremendous wink that embraced all hands except Disko and Salters, and the incident was closed. Then they made berth after berth to the northward, the dories out almost every day, running along the east edge of the Grand Bank in 30 to 40 fathom water, and fishing steadily. It was here Harvey first met the squid, who was one of the best cod baits, but uncertain in his moods. They were waked out of their bunks one black night by yells of "Squid-o!" from Salters, and for an hour and a half every soul aboard hung over his squid jig, a piece of lead painted red and armed at the lower end with a circle of pins bent backward like half-opened umbrella ribs. The squid, for some unknown reason, likes and wraps himself around this thing, and is hauled up ere he can escape from the pins. But as he leaves his home he squirts first water and next ink into his captor's face, and it was curious to see the men weaving their heads from side to side to dodge the shot. They were as black as sweeps when the flurry ended, but a pile of fresh squid lay on the deck, and the large cod thinks very well of a little shiny piece of squid tentacle at the tip of a clam-baited hook. Next day they caught many fish, and met the Carrie Pitman, to whom they shouted their luck, and she wanted to trade 7 cod for 1 fair-sized squid.
But Disko would not agree at the price, and the Carrie dropped sullenly to leeward and anchored half a mile away, in the hope of striking on to some for herself. Disko said nothing till after supper, when he sent Dan and Manuel off to buoy the We're Here's cable, and announced his intention of turning in with the broadaxe. Dan naturally repeated these remarks to a dory from the Carrie, who wanted to know why they were buoying their cable, since they were not on rocky bottom. "Dad says he wouldn't trust a ferry boat within 5 mile o' you," Dan howled cheerfully. "Well, why don't he git out, then? Who's hind'rin'?" says the other. "'Cause you jest the same as lee bowed him, an' he don't take that from any boat, not to speak o' such a driftin' gurry butt as you be." "She ain't driftin' any this trip," said the man angrily, for the Carrie Pitman had an unsavory reputation for breaking her ground tackle. "Then how do you make berths?" said Dan. "It's her best point o' sailin', an' if she's quit driftin', what in thunder are you doin' with a new jib boom?" That shot went home. "Hey, you Portugoosy organ grinder, take your monkey back to Gloucester. Go back to school, Dan Troop," was the answer. "Overalls! Overalls!" yelled Dan, who knew that one of the Carrie's crew had worked in an overall factory the winter before. "Shrimp! Gloucester shrimp! Get out, you Novy!" To call a Gloucester man a Nova Scotian is not well received. Dan answered in kind. "Novy yourself, you Scrabble towners! You Chatham wreckers! Git out with your brick in your stockin'!" And the forces separated, but Chatham had the worst of it.
"I knew how 'twould be," said Disko. "She's drawed the wind round already. Someone oughter put a desist on that packet. She'll snore till midnight, and jest when we're gittin' our sleep she'll strike adrift. Good job we ain't crowded with craft hereaways. But I ain't goin' to up anchor for Chatham. She may hold."
The wind, which had hauled round, rose at sundown and blew steadily. There was not enough sea, though, to disturb even a dory's tackle, but the Carrie Pitman was a law unto herself. At the end of the boys' watch they heard the crack, crack, crack of a huge muzzle-loading revolver aboard her. "Glory, glory, hallelujah!" sung Dan. "Here she comes, Dad. Butt end first, walkin' in her sleep, same as she done on Queero." Had she been any other boat, Disko would have taken his chances, but now he cut the cable as the Carrie Pitman, with all the North Atlantic to play in, lurched down directly upon them. The We're Here, under jib and riding sail, gave her no more room than was absolutely necessary. Disko did not wish to spend a week hunting for his cable, but scuttled up into the wind as the Carrie passed within easy hail, a silent and angry boat, at the mercy of a raking broadside of banked chaff.
"Good evenin'," said Disko, raising his headgear. "An' how does your garden grow?"
"Go to Ohio and hire a mule," said Uncle Salters. "We don't want no farmers here." "Will I lend you my dory anchor?" cried Long Jack. "Unship your rudder and stick it in the mud," said Tom Platt. "Say!" Dan's voice rose shrill and high, as he stood on the wheel box. "Say! Is there a strike in the overall factory, or have they hired girls, you shackamaxons?" "Veer out the tiller lines," cried Harvey, "and nail 'em to the bottom." That was a salt-flavored jest he had just been put up to by Tom Platt. Manuel leaned over the stern and yelled, "Jonah Morgan play the organ! Ha ha ha!" He flourished his broad thumb with a gesture of unspeakable contempt and derision, while little Penn covered himself with glory by piping up, "Gee, a little! Hish! Come here! Haw!" They rode on their chain for the rest of the night, a short, snappy, uneasy motion, as Harvey found, and wasted half the forenoon recovering the cable. But the boys agreed the trouble was cheap at the price of triumph and glory, and they thought with grief over all the beautiful things that they might have said to the discomfited Carrie. End of chapter.